Hi, everybody. This is code 2744 VMworld 2021. I'm pretty excited. I actually haven't been super excited kind of walking up to VMworld, but now that it's here, I'm really excited. Hopefully you've checked out some other sessions today. Mine is loop, swoop, and pull. PowerCLI will be as easy as tying your shoes. Now, what I learned in my pre-demo is that I had a lot of stuff in here with cool pictures of different shoes and all that fun stuff. I had to cut all that out because I don't have time. So we're going to get started. A little bit about me, if I can click on the right screen. Here we go. Oh, disclaimer, there's nothing forward facing. It's all about real stuff. All right. I am Justin Sider. I'm an avid PowerShell programmer. You can see that I'm the CIO of Belay Technologies. I have a personal blog at invoke-automation.blog. Not a whole lot going on there recently, but maybe that'll change over the next few months. You can find me on GitHub, JP Sider, Slack, JP Sider, pretty much anywhere JP Sider, you can hit me up. All of this code that you'll see today will be on my GitHub page or GitHub site. I'm a vExpert, VMware Code Coach, love VMware Code, love that they put these kinds of events on. So thank you very much. All right, let's hop right into it. All right, so before I jump into it, actually I'll leave that one up there. I was trying to decide how to give this information to everybody. So what I decided on is that I'm going to do every type of loop that I can think of in PowerShell, and I'm going to do the same task with that loop. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time through the slides because it's really just going to be regurgitated when we get back down to the actual live code. So keep in mind, I'm doing every type of PowerShell loop that I can think of, and all we're doing is basically cloning some VMs. And why I want to show you this is that there is no right or wrong answer when you're writing PowerShell code in personally. Now, there might be better, there might be slower, there might be faster, there might be more efficient. But what we're going to see from me is just an example of cloning the VM 5 times in each different type of way. So the first one we have is a for loop. I can tell you that no matter what PowerShell code I'm writing, I never use a for loop. It's terrible. It doesn't make sense. When you think of PowerShell, you think of PowerShell being human readable. We have our verb, noun, context. And, you know, the for loop just doesn't do that. So you can see the example here. I'll show you that it works. You'll have an example in GitHub, but I recommend to never use this one. All right, for each object. So this is going to be mainly when you're looking at those one-liners. So this isn't a one-liner. You can make this into a one-liner, and it gets to be a little tricky because you have to set up the object, or you're passing in an object and then or a collection of objects, and then you're iterating through each of those one at a time. And again, same thing, we're just cloning a number of VMs. We're setting up a quick little array of numbers, doing the 1.5, and then looping through each one of those and running our new VM command. All right, this is the for each. Very similar to that for each object, except you're setting up a variable ahead of time. It's not passed through the pipeline. This is my bread and butter. If I'm gonna choose to execute a loop, this is the one I'm most likely gonna choose for a task-based command. If it's something that I'm waiting for, we'll get into those in a couple seconds. But for each is something that you need to learn, you should learn. It's going to make the most sense. You're also going to notice throughout my code today that I have quite a bit of logging. That's great for debugging. The examples in the slideshow are going to be slightly different than what you'll see in VS Code in a few minutes here. All right, a while. This is not my favorite. And the reason is that you might potentially skip the entire code loop, right? So you don't actually execute this once. So it's great if you want to evaluate whether or not something's true or whether or not something is false. But this code may never be executed, this code that you're seeing right down here. So this stuff may never be executed if this is never going to be the case. But nonetheless, you can still make it work. It still works. All right, do while. This is an excellent choice. So this one, you are always going to run the code at least one time. So you kind of get that choice, right? Do you want to do the while where you evaluate first, or do you want to run the code one time and then evaluate? So at the bottom, or so what you can see here is that we set up a couple of variables. We're setting up, you know, the maximum number of VMs, and then we set up our count, and then we're going to iterate through. We're running the new VM command. We iterate, or we increase that count each time, and then we evaluate whether or not that count is reaching our maximum. So this one I like a lot because it always executes my code, and it's great for debugging, right? If I never enter that code, it makes it very difficult for me to debug. All right, do until, this is almost exactly the same as do while. It's really just a verbiage change. I'm trying to think of, a really good way to, I don't know an example that I could give you where I would use do until versus a do while. Maybe from a timing perspective, but not from a count perspective, I guess. I don't think I ever really used do until. It was actually something I found when I was doing some research to, present this information to you guys. All right. Breaking. So this is a great way to stop a loop. So if you have, in this example, again, it's kind of overkill. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I wanted to show that you can break out of a loop without having to reach the actual context of what you're dealing with. So, for our number list, we set it 1 to 50, and then we start looping through. And then basically what we can say halfway through our loop is, we break once that number equals 5. I don't know why I would do this way, but it was an example that I can provide, and we'll show you how that works as we get into the live code. All right, so this is the link. I'll put this back up at the very end. This is where everything's going to be saved. It's already up there actually. And then what we can do at the end, you're going to take your survey. Let's get out of this. All right, hopping into code. All right, so first thing I'm providing you is an opportunity to create your environment. So I have a little vSphere here. It's kind of hanging off the side of my screen. I just wanted to make sure you guys could see things as it was happening. So little cluster, a couple little hosts in my home lab. First thing I'm going to do, I'm not really going to show you this because it's just some basic PowerShell stuff or PowerCLI stuff. What I did is actually went through the UI and used code capture. Code capture is awesome. It's super helpful when trying to do things that you don't normally do or don't do that often. I did a VMworld presentation on it last year. And it's really simple to use. I'm not going to show you that today, but basically we're going to connect into the VMware or vCenter server, and then we're setting a VM host. You need this for some of the follow-on commands. And then here's the start of the code capture. This is defining all the different properties for the VM. Sorry, I'm scrolling through this really fast. I know I'm really talking fast because I want to make sure you guys get some options to ask some questions here at the end. So I'm creating the VM, and then the next piece is I'm going to take that snapshot. Again, I use code capture to generate all this for me. I'm still old school. I don't like the integrated console, so you're going to see me copy and paste a lot. We can talk about that some other time if you'd like. All right, so it's going to create the VM, and then it's going to go ahead and take that snapshot, lots of output. I probably should have muted all that, but now you get to see that a live demo works and you get to see stuff. Hooray. All right, my VM's there, great. I'm going to clear the screen so we get to see stuff. All right. So my first one, this is that for loop. And I've got a bunch of stuff in here. So we're going to kind of go through it. Here's our standard loop, right? So for I equals 0, if I is less than 5, we're going to increase 5 and we're going to perform the task. So you can see that as we do this, we're just going to clone some VMs. Goes pretty quick. So these are linked clones. That's why it's happening really fast. There's actually no operating system here. It's just a shell of a VM. And I'm also running it on my NVMe, so it's like super, super quick. I like it. All right. So what do we see here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Hold up. I said we were going to clone 5 VMs, and we have 6. So the problem that we have is that it's indexed on 0, right? So when you think about it, you start at 0 and you count to 5. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know you can't see my fingers right now, but I used them to count. And I counted 6 fingers when I counted to 5. So we have to be aware of what's going on. So we're going to get rid of these guys. And they're gone super fast. I like it. And now we're going to start our index at 1. And if we start our index at 1, we'll get 5 VMs this time. And you can see now we have test again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and then you'll notice that I'm not getting any output here. So my next, whoop, that didn't work. Actually, I didn't clean it up. Okay, cool. Ooh, it already exists. All right, fair enough. the next piece is we are going to write a little output so that you can see what's going on during your script. So again, this is a for loop. This isn't one that I would typically use. You can see that we now are creating 5. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 agains. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lasts. And this time we have some output from our script or from our code block. All right, so let's get rid of these guys. And let's move on to for each object. All right, so here, this is pretty much the example that we had. Cool. This is the same example we had in the slideshow. Nothing too fancy here. We're creating the VMs. Again, we're not adding any messages, but you can see when I create this, it's gonna make a lot of noise. Maybe not too much. So this is the same kind of process, and now we're getting information about the VMs that are created. It's not too terrible, but we can actually quiet that down a little bit and actually have our output. So we'll create 6 through 10. And now you can see the difference in the output from the standard PowerCLI command. And what I did is I added this out null. So basically that says don't pipe anything out that VMware creates. Only pipe out my log messages. So what I can actually do is we'll get a little tricky with this. Let's see. Let's do 11 through 15. Oop, 156 will be here for a little while. And we'll get rid of this guy. And let's see what kind of noise that makes. Let's see what it outputs to the console. You can see it gets really messy here. So that's why I kind of take out the VMware or the PowerCLI login and I add my own login in, or at least output, right? Login is probably not the right thing. All right, so that's for each object. You can see it's in line, works great. And then let's clear this stuff out. Screen up. All right, we're back down to no VMs over here. Fantastic. For each, this is my favorite. You can see it makes, to me, it makes the most sense, right? I can read this in English, right? I have a number list. I'm creating it 1 to 5. I could do a comma separated values, whatever that array or whatever that collection is going to be. And then for each of those numbers in that number list that I just created, right? Number list that I just created, I'm going to create a VM with that test number name. I'm outputting a little line of text, and I'm going to go ahead and create that. So this, to me, when I read the code, makes the most sense. It also, you know, with the index, that problem that we have with the for loop, we don't have that here because it all kind of flows together and makes sense. All right, we'll clean these guys up. I'm going to get to those questions at the end. So I just saw one pop in from Kirk. All right. The short answer is yes, you can, but we can show you what that looks like. All right, while. This is that with the while loop that we talked about. So we're setting a top level variable of 5 VMs. We're saying we're going to start at 0. And then while that VM count is less than that number of VMs, we're going to create that VM or run the create command. So we're going to copy all this stuff. And we create all the VMs. Again, I'm just, you know, this whole presentation is about making sure that you guys can understand the loops and that you can really use any loop that you want to create or any loop that makes sense to you to do the same work. All right. So those are all created over here. Fun times. It's a little monotonous. All right. Do while. All right. So this is going to run that first time, and then we can mess with this one a little bit. So let's say that, yeah. So I left a note in here. So if you increase the count, otherwise you'll create VMs forever, right? So if you don't add this line, that VM count never increases, and it'll always be less than the number of VMs. So you know, when you're doing a do while loop, you got to make sure that you're actually going to reach that command. Now, this could be great for if you want to create a never ending loop, you would just set that value to, you know, either something that doesn't exist or you just set it to true. So you could just say, do this while it's true and it'll run forever. So when I'm creating PowerShell programs, you'll probably see me do that quite a bit if you don't want to exit out of that. We'll create those again. And we can actually fake this one out a little bit. So we could start. So one thing to do if I was actually to run this again, kind of cool. So notice I'm not copying those variables. So if I run this, you're going to see something interesting happen. So test number 5 got created. So up in the first run, we did 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we bumped down. And when I ran it the second time, it only created number 5, right? So I didn't copy these 2 variables up here by my mouse little cursor. And it kept going. And if I run it again and again, it'll increase by 1 every time because the do while loop is going to execute the first time every time. If this was a while loop and the number of VMs was still set to 5, it would only run, it wouldn't run because you're evaluating beforehand. So now we're up to 7 VMs. Great. All right, let's clean these guys up. And then we're going to jump into do until. Which you'll see is very similar to do while. We're going to reset all this stuff. I love when our users actually answer questions for other users. That's fantastic. Yeah, we'll give that a shot. So there was a question that was just put in that said, is there a way to dynamically get the count of VMs in a cluster? And yes. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to get cluster. You can see it's cluster 01. And then all I have to do is get the VM. And then you can see that we have the VMs listed. And then we can wrap that. And we can say measure hyphen object. And you can say count on the end of that. And it can tell us 9. And then if you come back over here, you can see the little guy hiding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So hopefully for Levi, you get to see that you can do it. So I'll put this in that chat room. Let's see if we can do that. Does not appear to be sending my little enter. To everyone go. Oh, there goes. All right, so I just put that in the chat room. So one thing you want to be careful of when you do count is that you actually want to measure the object. So one thing I've learned over time is that sometimes if you get a 0 count, you might get a 1 return back because you ran a command. So always pipe that to measure object and then do a count on what you measured. Little, you know, experience from many hours of pain. All right, so let's get rid of these guys. All right, and then we have break. So here on break, you can see that we have number list is set to 50 now. So we set it from 1 to 50. And then for each of those numbers, we're going to do our for each loop. And then what I decided is I threw a little qualifier in here. So if the number equals 5, we're going to break. So we're going to start at 1. Once we get to 5, I expect it to break out. Let's say 25. Let's see if we can get this thing to spin some VMs up real quick. So you can see it'll keep going, keep going, keep going. And I could put some more, you know, error messages or log messages into the code. if we needed to. All right, so I think at this point, I've run through all of my code examples. I'm admitting them. I'm doing it, Justin. I don't know how to work all these fancy things. All right, so created all these VMs. Is there a way I can turn on for people to just be able to talk as well? Is that something that we can do? So they can ask questions, or we
People can just unmute themselves and talk whenever they want. Just up to you how you want to run your session.
Yeah, so there you go. Feel free to unmute and ask questions, whether it's specific to this or just some other random PowerShell, PowerCLI question you had. I'm game to answer some stuff. Any questions about loops, swoops, or tying your shoes? All right, so we had a question, which is the fastest loop? That's a great question. So am I logging anything or am I just running through it? And am I looking at the overall command, or do you want to know, like, someone just answered one that does nothing. Well, that's valid. All right, I'm going to throw this at the bottom of the screen. So if anybody wants, can everybody see the link at least? So if you're looking for the, so if I was to create VMs, the sad thing is, like, these VMs go up pretty quick. So as far as PowerShell is concerned, probably for each object would be the fastest way in doing this, right? Because the fastest way to do it would to not be iterating through multiple lines of PowerShell. So for each object would be probably your fastest option here. The question is whether or not you can generate the object on the left-hand side of that command, right? So whether or not you can generate this string here, right? So for me, it's easy, right? We're just doing a couple numbers. But if we were trying to run some longer command, it might slow you down a little bit. All right, there's a question as to whether or not we can create multiple VMs. So that's going to depend on whether or not we can do I don't know. Yeah. So you can do run async on this, and it'll create them pretty quick. So let's go back down to break, and let's do run async. And let's see this one pretty quick. So I think for this demo, that's about as quick as you're going to see them get created. All right, the question is simple use case as to whether or not continue, or whether to use continue as opposed to break, or maybe a mix of both commands. I'm trying to, so for break, I'm checking if whether or not a condition is true. So I'm trying to think of a reason I would do this. So let's say I ran into an issue with creating a VM, and instead of continuing on, and let's say I got to VM number 17 and it failed, I might choose to break out of that command instead of continuing on and getting to number 18 or 19. Break would allow me to break completely out of that loop and not continue on and potentially create bad VMs. Oh, you don't like C system 32? It's fine. Everyone's quiet. There's a question as to whether or not I ever use what if. No, I'm brave. I don't choose to use what if. I know it's there. It is a great tool, but I'd rather break something than worry about whether or not it's going to run. So Justin Brandt brings up a great point that run async doesn't take into account the resources. So I can create all these 25 VMs, or create them really fast on a single host, not allowing maybe vMotion to move those VMs off of a host. Best practices for nested loops. PowerShell people are going to tell you not to do it. So there's a thing out there called code complexity, and they're going to tell you to limit the number of nested loops and probably the number of loops in general if you're writing scripts, functions, code, or modules. So, there's a time and place for everything. If you can break up your code to make it a little bit more simpler, I would recommend that. Gary Diamond brings up a good point. You should definitely know what you're doing before you start. No, Dave, there is no bonus points for the hackathon for attending my session. Although I do appreciate you coming in late. I did put comments in my code. Is that a judgment, or you just okay? This one.
No, that was your other.
All right, this one doesn't have comments. There's other comments in there. Look at that one. Look at that comment. All right. All right. There we go. Let's get that back up there. So I want to thank you all for attending the session. Reach out to me on Twitter or GitHub. Check out the code if you have any questions. I want to thank the VMware Code team for putting this on. Live demos are way better than recorded demos or sessions. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of VMworld.